Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm back after my 3-week hiatus to bring you all my reviews for Sons of Anarchy Season 5 right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, as always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's Sons of Anarchy episode review. But before I jump into this review, just want to let you guys know I got a couple of updates that'll be at the end of this review, so stay tuned for that. And before I jump into my thoughts on this week's episode, I'm actually going to go ahead and tackle these reviews a tad bit different. Hang on a minute. There won't be any huge differences from last season's reviews and this season's reviews. Pretty much, I'm going to try to condense my reviews a bit. So what I'll be doing this season, as in contrary to what I did last season, instead of so much the recapping, since the vast majority of you all who are watching this video have already seen the episode, this season I'm just going to pretty much be giving my overall thoughts on each episode, and then I'll go into more detail with specific scenes or specific topics that I want to discuss about that week's episode. So that's how I'll be doing the reviews for this season. Like I said, you're still going to get, the same OAW flavor for the reviews, but they're just going to be a little bit more condensed and not too lengthy. So with that being said, let's jump into my thoughts and pretty much my review of Season 5, Episode 1, entitled Sovereign. Okay, so first and foremost, as far as the episode as a whole, good episode. I like how this season starts off, and I can already see a bunch of things that they're setting the groundwork to build upon later on in this season. So, quick thoughts I had going into the beginning of the episode. First and foremost, I was a tad bit surprised to see that Season 5 starts off only 3 weeks after the conclusion of Season 4. I was actually a little surprised by that. I expected some type of time lapse, not much, maybe a couple of months, maybe even a year, but we're only 3 weeks after the conclusion of Season 4, so that took me by surprise a little bit. But in hindsight, after watching the whole episode, I kind of understand why Season 5 is picking up where it is, because there's so many things we have to take in consideration. Number one, we have to see how Clay is going to transition into his new role, a role of less power in the club. We have to see how that's going to work. And so it would make sense that this would be the point we pick up at. Also, we have to see how Opie is going to, how he's handling the death of Piney and last season, how he's handling this sense of betrayal that he currently has with Jax. And so we need to see how that's going to develop. So of course, starting off right here makes a lot of sense. Also, with the introduction of Damon Pope, and of course the major conflict that I think which is pretty much going to be surrounding this season, with him, his gang affiliations, the Niners, and then of course their rivalry with the Suns, seeing how that's going to develop is another reason why this season needed to start right where it did. So now I want to go ahead and take this opportunity to pretty much give my thoughts on the characters, and I'm going to do this by tackling the main cast first and then the new characters. So as far as the main cast, quick thoughts on Jax as Prez. Jax is pretty much handling it the way I thought he would. And for the most part, Jax is pretty much operating as always. So far, now granted, Jax has only been in the position of president for, 3 weeks, but there doesn't seem to be any type of ego trip. There doesn't seem to be any type of, any type of abuse of power yet, and it doesn't really feel like the role is weighing on Jax yet. But then again, one could argue Jax, everything he did in the previous seasons as the vice president, there was a lot of responsibility that Jax took upon himself and, put on his shoulders. So maybe the transition to president isn't really that much of a burden for Jax. Maybe it's not really that much of a challenge. And as we've seen, he's acclimated to it pretty well. It's business as usual for Jax. I like the way, we saw him dealing with the cartel and whatnot. And so far, so good, However, I do want to close my thoughts on Jax with this. I can already see a possible, I guess you can call it an eternal conflict that is going to be going on within the club. And I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail when I get to my thoughts on Clay. Because is it just me, or does the need for Jax to disappear, the need for him to be, to get out of Charming as it was, or at least go into hiding, because he is still in Charming, but he's in hiding. I can already see that setting the groundwork for Clay's sort of, I guess you can call it, interior motives, and Clay's, main arc in this season. I can already see how that's going to go into play in relation to that. And so, like I said, I'll talk about that a tad bit more once I get to Clay. So, next member I want to talk about, I guess I'll go ahead and discuss my thoughts on Opie. I underestimated the conflict that happened with Jax and Opie in last season. I underestimated it because now I think that the line in the sand is starting to be drawn. As of right now, I do not see that friendship. I don't see that friendship being mended. I don't. And it's not even so much a thing of, well, maybe it won't happen now, maybe it'll happen later down the line. I don't see that happening. I think from this point on, their relationship can only get more strained. But I don't see how Jax and Opie will be ever, they'll ever be able to make amends. I don't see that happening. Especially after seeing the little preview about what's going to be going on for the rest of the season. I just think the relationship, I think the friendship is over. And I think what's going to happen now is that between Jax and Opie, I think we're going to see the transition from, friendship to strained relationship to perhaps even a rivalry. And then, of course, because the show is so deeply based on Shakespeare's Hamlet, just knowing about, having read that and knowing about Hamlet's relationship with all of his comrades and, affiliates in that story, I can definitely see him and Opie. That's it. It can only get worse from here. So that's my thought on Opie. I want to talk just briefly. I'm so fucking glad that Bobby is back, and I'm glad that he's the vice president. Because Bobby was pretty much the consigliere within the club. So the fact that Bobby's back and that now he's in a much higher position of power, and now, Jax being in the position that he's in and having Bobby, to his left, being the guy that, keep him on the up and up and, kind of keep him on the straight and narrow, keep him focused, now that Bobby, like I said, the eye on the shoulder, the guy of wisdom, the one to, shine light and give perspective whenever Jax's judgment may be clouded, I would not, with the exception of Opie, I wouldn't have thought of anybody else better for that position. Brief thoughts on Gemma. I'm not sure what they're doing with what they're going to do with Gemma this season. I'm not sure where her character arc is going to go next. We've already seen Gemma tackle, so many different obstacles and so many different scenarios and so many different situations. And of course, we've seen her, in so many different emotional pitfalls and, highs and lows and things like that. So I don't know what they're doing with Gemma. But I will say this. I think whatever is going to happen with Gemma this season, I have a feeling that it's going to peak with her and Tara's conflict coming to blows. I think that this is going to be the season when that, when the rubber meets the road between Gemma and Tara. I honestly can't see them dragging that out any further than they already have. I think that with the conclusion of season 4, I think that was Tara pretty much, making the statement to Gemma that now that Jax is in charge, she's going to be the main lady in his life, and she's going to, be that support system for Jax, and that Gemma's no longer needed. But also, just because of everything that Tara did last season, I think now more than ever, Tara needs to solidify her stance as a force to be reckoned with in Gemma's eyes. So whatever is going on with Gemma this season, I think that's where, her arc's gonna peak. That needs to happen this season. That has to happen this season. Okay, let's talk about Clay. Now, originally, I thought that we were pretty much going to see Clay kind of fulfill the role that Piney did. The member of the First Nine who, gotten older, and, is now, at the other end of the table. He's sitting right where Piney sat. And so, Clay lost, Clay's relationship with Jax, done. Clay's marriage, done. Presidency, done. All his, influence and power, for the most part, is dwindling as we speak. And so, Clay is in that position now. He has so many regrets, and he has so much to make up for. But that scene when they were at the table and Clay came clean about killing Piney and shit, but remember, he twisted the truth. He told half truths. Okay? I think that Clay is going to try and take the presidency back this season. I don't know how. But what I mentioned earlier about Jax, I think Clay is going to use that to his advantage in order to get the leverage that he needs in order to pull a power play like that off. Clay is scheming. Don't think that confession was sincere. Don't think that Clay was just trying to come clean. He was just trying to be, do what's right for the club and all that. It's bullshit. And I was actually surprised that Jackson helped Clay cover that shit up. But like I said, it's a play of power. The shit's chess. It ain't checkers. You see what I'm saying? Just as Clay is making these maneuvers, Jackson's going to be making maneuvers of his own in order to counteract that. So I'm going to be keeping a watchful eye on that, because I want to see how that, develops. I want to see where they go with that, because I'm not sure yet. But it's going to be good, no doubt. Ron fucking Perlman, it's going to be fucking good. They're going to do that right. So we'll just keep an eye out on that. And final thoughts as far as the main cast, man. Tig, I had a well, of course, when Tig got the phone call, I knew it was going to be a setup, and I had a feeling they were going to bring his daughter back at some point in time in the series. I will say this though, before Tig got that phone call, I didn't expect that, but in hindsight, after watching the episode conclude and whatnot, it kind of makes sense. So my only thoughts on Tig, I got a feeling that Tig is going to be the main one pursuing this rivalry against Pope and the Niners and whatnot. Because as I mentioned before, we got the thing going on with Jax, we got the thing going on with Clay. And of course, Bobby's going to, be doing his maneuvering and whatnot, trying to keep everything on the up and up. But I think Tig, even though he's not sergeant at arms anymore, I think Tig is still going to kind of fulfill that role. Tig's a soldier. That's what it is. Regardless of whatever his title is, he's still a soldier. He has that mentality about him. And having suffered a loss like that, you can't expect him not to react in a retaliatory manner. It's just gonna happen. So, gonna have to see how that develops. But now I want to talk about the new characters. one thought, before I do that though, one comment about Juice. I got a feeling, and I'm not sure, I could be completely wrong about this, but I got a feeling that I think at some point in time, Juice might become a possible liaison between the club and the sheriff, because I don't think his, banter with the sheriff, his relationship with him, I don't think that's over. I think we're going to see more interactions between those two, and I'm talking about like solo interactions, not group settings. I think we're going to see more of that, and of course, Juice is still, you can still see traces of guilt on Juice's conscience. So I don't think it's going to be anything as drastic as what it was last season. But if Juice was to become somewhat of kind of like the middleman between the sheriff and the club, not a snitch, keep in mind, not a snitch, I'm just talking about a liaison, somebody to relay information to both parties, the possibility of that is not out of the question. That's all I'm saying. That is not out of the question. And so, okay, so my thoughts on the new characters. First and foremost, let's talk about let's talk about Jimmy Smith's character, Nero, I think was his name. I like him. No clue what role he'll play in this season, but I like him. I mean, I've always liked that actor. He plays very interesting characters. So I'm curious to see where well he'll fit into the mold. But I gotta say, Damian Pope, is he ruthless? Yes. However, is he fair? I think he is. And you know what? It's so hard for me. Okay, here's the thing. Because we know that the Sons, they're not necessarily the good guys. You see what I'm saying? Which is one of the reasons why I like Sons of Anarchy. Kind of like in the same reason why I love The Godfather so much, is that we're being introduced to the main cast, and these are the characters we're supposed to sympathize and root for, but they're not the good guys. Remember that. They're not the good guys. And more often than not throughout the series, whatever antagonistic force they had was usually always a greater evil, right? But Damon Pope doesn't come off like that to me. He doesn't. I'm not saying that he doesn't have the potential to be the greatest evil, the greater evil. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, so far, he appears to be a character that ruthless, absolutely, but fair, kinda, yeah. I mean, his actions are not completely unreasonable. Clearly, he has a reputation and a status, an image that he likes to, keep up, that he doesn't want diminished in any way. He doesn't like to get his hands dirty. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Sons are able to compete with somebody like that. Because let's face it, they haven't really had an antagonist like that since, I would argue, probably since season 3. Now, I'm not saying that, of course we know the whole thing with the cartel about them, being in with the law and shit like that. We know about that whole thing. But what I'm saying is, I'm talking about like that solo opposing force who has so much power in his organization. We haven't seen that since Zobel in season 2 and what's your boy's name? What was it, Jimmy? I think it was in season 3 with the IRA. So we haven't seen it in about 2 seasons. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that. But also, I do like the idea of having that type of opposing force so close to home again. Because remember, the thing with Jimmy in season 3, that was, they had to go all the way to Ireland over that. But not since season 2 with Zobel was that person so close to home. So I'm really looking forward to that. I want to see what happens with this. And so in order to wrap up my review, just pretty much my closing thoughts on the episode. Like I said, I thought it was really good. I like what it's setting up. I like the direction that it's going in. And so I think at this point in time, I'm just really interested to see how everything plays out. It's a little bit too early to be making too many assumptions, but like I said, the ones I made in this video hopefully aren't unreasonable, and yeah, I just want to see how things work out. So that'll do it for my review of Sons of Anarchy Season 5, Episode 1, Sovereign. Okay, so now let's talk about the updates. A few updates. I know a bunch of you all have been wondering where I've been. Well, of course, school started about 3 weeks ago. So I've been very, busy with that and whatnot. And then, of course, I'm still working on my comic book, Totems. Issue 1 is almost completed. Unfortunately, though, and I guess this will be the first official announcement about the Totems release date. Even though we're almost finished with issue 1, however, due to some post-production procedures that have to be taken before we release it, Totems issue 1 will have to be postponed. The release will have to be pushed back until next month. So October is when issue 1 will be officially released. And like I said, I apologize for that. But we hit a couple of snags during production, and there were a couple of things that have to be done after the book's completed that I didn't anticipate. So I apologize for that, but don't worry. Next month, October, Totems issue 1 will be good to go. And speaking of Totems issue 1, you guys will be hearing it first. I got the verification. I got my receipt a couple of hours ago. OAW Comics is going to be at this year's New Orleans Comic-Con, November 30th through December 2nd at the New Orleans Convention Center. Myself and the rest of the Totems creative team, we are going to be at New Orleans Comic-Con, and we're going to be, pushing and promoting Totems issue 1. So for any of the Otaku faithful, for any of my faithful viewers, or hell, for any comic book fans in general, any of you guys who are in the Louisiana area, or who may be looking to get out of town for the weekend, by all means, swing by the OAW Comics table. And hell, to any of my viewers, I would love to meet you guys in person. You'll get a face-to-face with me and whatnot, and so yeah, come hang, kick it with your boy. Like I said, that's this year's New Orleans Comic-Con, November 30th through December 2nd at the New Orleans Convention Center. And we gonna be doing that. And so, one more update. I am making my return to killerfilm.com. I got 3 movies lined up that I gotta review. And so hopefully, I'll get through them in a reasonable enough time, and I should have a review out later this week. If not, it'll definitely be out next week. And this week and every week, I'm going to be, knocking out movies. So for any of you guys who read my reviews on killerfilm.com, keep an eye out for that, because your boy's coming back. And so with that being said, just to let you guys know what's coming back, what'll be coming up on the YouTube channel later this week. Friday, discussion of the week returns, and I got a good topic, and I know you guys been waiting 3 weeks for that. And then Sunday, my comic book Hollywood review. I believe I'm doing Daredevil this week, so keep an eye out for that. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next week, peace.